Backups. Disasters happen. It's a fact of life. Even the best planning, the best hardware, and the best software will eventually fail. It's inevitable. A good backup strategy is your best insurance policy against disasters. Now, we can't prevent disasters from occurring, but we can plan for the fact that they will happen, and when they do, we can minimize their impact on our environment. Windows Server 2003 includes an improved version of the NT Backup utility and supports backing up data onto local disks, removable storage, or even libraries of tapes or disks. Now, if the original data on your hard disk is accidentally erased or overwritten or becomes inaccessible because a hard drive dies, you can easily restore the data from the archived copy. So let's fire up NT Backup and take a look. So we'll come down here and we'll click on Start, All Programs, Accessories, System Tools, and then Backup. Now the backup utility will start and it'll initially look for any backup devices you have on your system. Now by default the backup utility will start in wizard mode. Now you can turn this off if you like simply by unchecking this box, but for now we'll just leave it on and then we'll click Next. Now it asks us what we want to do. Do we want to back up some files or restore some files? Well, at this stage we don't have any backups that we can restore from, so we'll choose the default, which is to back up some files and settings, and then we'll click Next. Now we can choose whether we want to back up everything on this computer or manually select the files that we wish to back up. So we'll choose the second option here, as backing up the entire system can take a while, and we'll choose Next. Now we see two panes. In the left we can select folders from the tree of our system drives. In the right, this is where we can select individual files that we wish to include in our backup. Now over here on the left we have two types of boxes. We have a greyed out box here next to My Computer, Desktop and My Network Places, and then next to My Documents we have a white box. Now the white boxes we can directly back up from here by placing a check in the box, but you notice that we can't actually place checks in these grey boxes. Now we can still back them up, so don't get me wrong, you can still back up these devices that do have a greyed out box, but we can't do it directly from here. So such as in the case of the desktop, the actual path to the desktop, now I'm currently logged in as the administrator, so we'll expand My Computer, our C drive, then under our Documents and Settings folder, if we expand that, we can see our administrator account, so we can expand that there, and here we can see the desktop. So we can actually back up our desktop by placing a check in this box. Now if we come over here to the left hand side and expand My Computer, we can see the drives we currently have listed in this system. Now we have an A drive, a C drive, a D drive, which is our CD-ROM, and we have the system state. So in other words, if we wanted to back up our entire C drive, we could simply come over here and place a check in this box, and you can see that would also include the My Documents, because as you might recall, My Documents is actually located under C, Documents and Settings, the administrator account who we're currently logged in as, and then down here if we just expand this across a bit we can see My Documents. Okay, but that's going to take a while to back all this up, so I'm not going to choose this option. We'll unselect that, and what we'll do is we'll come down here and we'll just select My Documents. Now because we've selected My Documents, up here on our C drive you can see that we have a grey tick in the box next to Local Disk C. So if we expand that out we can see another grey checkbox here under Documents and Settings. When we expand that we can see the administrator account again has a grey tick next to it, and now we can see a blue one here next to My Documents. So the actual folder that we're actually backing up here is My Documents, which is referenced by the blue tick. Now the reason we see these grey ticks here in the hierarchy above the My Documents folder is because that's the path that it needs to take to come down here and back it up. So that's just a visual pointer, if we're up higher in the hierarchy, that we do have something below that's checked for backup. Okay, so we've selected My Documents for backup, so we'll come down here and we'll choose Next. Now we need to tell the backup program how we want to back up our data. Now you'll notice here that the Select Backup Type box is greyed out. Now this is because we don't actually have any other backup devices installed on this computer. So if we had a local tape device, for example, you'd be able to select that device here. So as it stands, the only option we have is to back up our data to a file. So next, we need to choose a place where we're going to save our backup. Now if we check this drop down box, you can see we don't actually have anything here because we haven't defined any locations to save our backups to. So we'll come over here to the Browse button, and then we'll need to browse for a location in which we want to save our backup. Now I'll just do this on the desktop, and I'll leave the default name here of Backup.bkf, and then we'll click on Save. Now underneath we can see we can type a name for this backup. Now by default it will default to the name that we supplied when we clicked on the Browse button, which is Backup. So if we change this here to Backup Now and then clicked on Save, you would notice that our name here will also change. Now I'll just accept that default and I'll choose Next. Okay, so we're done. Now we've got a summary which tells us that the name of the backup we're supplying is going to be called Backup.now.bkf and it's going to live on our desktop. The description, it just tells us when we created this here. The contents of what we're backing up are just certain selected files and folders, and it's a file backup that we're performing. Now we do have the option down here of setting up some of our advanced options, but for the moment I'm going to skip this. So what we'll do is we'll click Finish and then the backup will start. Now if for some reason you do wish to cancel the backup, you can simply come up here and click Cancel. And then we'll get a message which asks us to confirm if we do want to cancel this operation. Now for the moment I'm actually going to click Yes. And now we can see that our backup was cancelled, and over here we have a report button to tell us a bit more information about what occurred during our backup. So if we click on that, it'll open up a text file, and this just simply tells us that the operation didn't successfully complete. So what we'll do is we'll close that there, we'll close here again. Now we'll reopen our NT backup. Okay, here we are again, we're in wizard mode. We'll click Next, we'll click Backup Files and Settings, we'll select to choose what we want to back up, we'll choose Next. Again, we'll go to My Documents, we'll select that, we'll come down here and we'll choose Next. We'll leave the default name here and we'll just overwrite the existing backup that we created. We'll choose Next, and this time we'll come over here and we'll check the Advanced box. Now our first option here is to select the type of backup that we want. Now our choices are Normal, Copy, Incremental, Differential and a Daily backup. Now these are the 5 different types of backups that NT Backup supports. But before we go and discuss each of these, I want to introduce you to an important concept, the archive bit. When a file is created on your hard drive, the operating system sets an attribute which is called the archive bit. So to show you what we mean, let's open My Computer and then we'll browse to our desktop. Now you need to make sure that you're in the detailed view, and we are here by default, but if you're not in the details view, then you can change that by coming up here and clicking on the views icon and then selecting details. Okay, so we're in this view. We can see here an attribute column. Now what we'll quickly do is create a new file. We'll just create a text file here and we'll leave it as new text document, and over here in the attributes column we can see it's referenced by the letter A. Now this is the archive bit. Now the fact that this bit is here is an indicator to the operating system that this file has not been backed up. So let's quickly go and initiate a backup of this file only. So we'll close this down for a moment and we'll go back to NT Backup and we'll choose Next. We'll leave the default at Backup Files and Settings. We'll choose what to back up, we'll click Next, and then we'll come over here to My Computer, we'll expand C, Documents, Administrator, we'll check on the desktop, and here we can see our new text document. So we'll select that document, we'll choose Next, we'll just call this one Backup Text, and we'll choose Next, and then we'll choose Finish. And then we can see the backup is about to start. Now I'll just quickly pause this for the moment and I'll return once this backup's completed. Okay, our backup's done. We can click on Report if we like to see a report about what happened in our backup, and we can see that our backup was successful. Our backup was initiated via shadow copy of the contents of our C drive. We can see the backup type down here was set to normal, and of course when the backup started, when it was completed, and what sort of things happened during our backup. So we'll just close this now, and we'll click Close again. Now if we come back here and look at our new text document, over here on the right we can see the attribute column, which previously had the archive bit set, has now been removed. Now this is an indicator that the Windows operating system has now backed up this file. Okay, so let's go and open this document, and we'll just write a couple of characters into the document, and then we'll close the document and we will save the change. Now we can see that the attributes column again has an A listed. Now this is again an indicator to the Windows operating system that this file has now changed since the last backup. Okay, so with that in mind, and now that you understand what's going on with the archive bit and what it actually does, let's go back and we'll take a look at the available backup types. Okay, the first type of backup we'll look at is a normal backup. Now a normal backup is a full backup of all the files and folders that you select in NT Backup. Running a normal backup clears the archive bit, as we saw earlier. A normal backup is considered a baseline for all of the other backup types that back up only files that have been modified. Next we have a copy backup. Now this is equivalent to a normal backup, except it does not clear the archive bit. So you can think of as a copy backup as an ad hoc full backup that you can perform whenever you need an up-to-date backup, but you don't want to affect your existing backup routine. Next we have an incremental backup. Now an incremental backup only backs up files or folders that have had the archive bit change since the last normal or incremental backup. Now incremental backups are quick to perform, but they're slow to restore. Now the reason for this is that you have to restore the normal backup first and then each incremental backup you've created in order. So for example, let's say that you've performed a normal backup on Monday and then an incremental backup every other day of the week. Now on Monday, everything gets backed up without exception. On Tuesday, only the files that have changed, as indicated by the archive bit being present, will be backed up, and then this archive bit is cleared. So on Wednesday, any files that have changed will again have the archive bit present, and only those will be backed up, and so on until Monday rolls around again, and then we'll perform a normal backup. As you can see, backups are quick using this method, as only files that have been modified get backed up. The downside to using this method is that if you need to restore a file that was backed up, say on Thursday's backup, you'll need to restore Monday's backup first, and then Tuesday's, and then Wednesday's, and finally Thursday's just to restore the file. So this makes restoring files very time consuming. So if we're backing up to tapes, we're going to need every single tape up until the day the file needs restoring available to perform the restore. Next we have a differential backup. Now a differential backup is identical to an incremental backup, except a differential backup does not clear the archive bit on files that it backs up. So what this means is you're really backing up every file that's changed since the last normal or incremental backup. So for example, let's again say that you perform a normal backup on a Monday and then a differential backup every other day of the week. So on Monday everything gets backed up without exception and then the archive bit's cleared. On Tuesday, only the files that have changed, as indicated by the archive bit being present, will be backed up, but the archive bit is not cleared. So on Wednesday, files that have changed will again have the archive bit present, and these files, as well as all of those files that changed on Tuesday, will be backed up again. And so on until Monday rolls around, and then we'll perform a normal backup and then the archive bit cleared. So when we use the differential method, our backups are slower, as every file that's been modified since Monday's full normal backup, it gets backed up every single day. So if you're dealing with a lot of data, this method can also require several tapes a day, making this method very painful to perform. The upside to using this method is if you want to restore a file that was backed up, say on Thursday's backup, you'll only need to restore Monday's backup first. You can skip Tuesday, you can skip Wednesday, and then only insert Thursday's tape to restore the file. So this makes restoring files much quicker, as you'll only ever need a maximum of 2 tapes to perform the restore. Now the final type of backup we have is a daily backup, and this is similar to a copy backup. However, where a copy backup is a full backup that you can use to back up everything in the middle of your regular backup cycle, the daily backup only backs up files that have changed on the day you perform the daily backup. Like the copy backup, it doesn't clear the archive bit of the files that are backed up, and you can use a daily backup as an additional backup in the middle of your regular backup cycle without affecting it. Now another thing I want to talk about here is NTFS permissions. When you perform a restore of a file or directory that's been backed up from an NTFS file system, it's important that you realize the effect of restoring this data to drives that are formatted with other file systems. Firstly, if you're restoring to a drive formatted with the file allocation or the FAT file system, none of your permissions are going to be retained. FAT does not support file permissions, so if you restore your data to a FAT file system, you will lose all of your permissions. In fact, if you restore to a FAT file system, the only thing you're restoring is your data. Everything else associated with that data is lost. Next, if you're restoring a Windows 2000 or Windows 2003 NTFS backup to a Windows NT4 NTFS file system, then you're going to lose a lot of information in the process. Firstly, any permissions that you have on these files won't be retained, and that also goes with any encrypted file system settings, any disk quota information, any mounted drive information, and of course remote storage as well. None of that's going to be retained, it's all going to be lost. So the rule of thumb here is make sure that when you're restoring a Windows 2000 or Windows 2003 backup, restore it to another system that's also running Windows 2000 or Windows 2003 if you want to retain all of your settings. Okay, back in our advanced options, you can see the 5 types that we have, and we've already discussed those. Here we can specify whether we want to back up any contents of files which have already been migrated to our remote storage, so we can check that option if we wish. We'll just leave the default here at normal and we'll choose next. Next we have the option of verifying our data after it's been backed up. Now if you're dealing with some really business critical data here and you want to make absolutely sure that your data can be restored in the event of a disaster, select this option. Now after your backup has completed, NT Backup will reread the backup it's just performed to ensure that everything contained in the backup is readable and can be restored. Now checking this box will extend the time required to perform your backup, so it's your call whether you want to do this. It's a decision you're going to have to make, speed versus security. Now here we can use hardware compression if we have hardware that supports it. And down here we can disable the volume shadow copy if we like. Now disabling volume shadow copying will speed up your backups, but any currently open files won't be included in your backup. So if this was a file server that you're currently backing up and users have open files, I wouldn't recommend that you check this option. Now we'll leave these defaults and we'll choose next. Now if the media that we're currently using to back up our data already contains data, well, what do we want to do? We can append this backup to any existing backups, or we can replace them. Now the default is to append, so you won't actually overwrite anything, but if you've already got some data on an old tape and it's already been archived off-site or something like that, and you want to overwrite the tape, you can simply check the replace the existing backups. And then down here you have the option to specify that only the owner of the backup and an administrator can actually access the backup data and anything that gets appended to the medium. So we'll choose next. And now we can choose to run our backup now or to schedule it later. If you choose later, you have to give the backup a name and then you can set the schedule. Now I won't go into this now because we do have a whole video on scheduling backups, so I'll simply choose the Now button and then I'll select Next, and then we can see that we've completed our backup or restore wizard. If we click Finish, then our backup will start. Now as we check the option to replace our backup, we will get a message that says do we want to replace it, so a confirmation message, we'll select yes, and then we can see that our backup is going to start using shadow copy. Okay, our backup's complete. I'll click close, and now this time why don't we go and restore our file. So we'll go back to NT Backup, and in the meantime I'll just right click on my file here and I'll select delete. And we'll just empty the contents of the recycle bin just to be sure it's gone. And now our wizard started, so we'll choose next. Now this time we'll come down here and we'll choose to restore files and settings. We'll choose next. Now NT Backup retains a catalogue of the backups that it's performed. So if we come over here and look at our file backups that we performed and expand this out, we can see our backup text that we created just a moment ago. So we'll expand that out here and we can see our backup involves something on our C drive, so we'll expand that. We can see documents and settings, so we'll expand that as well. We'll expand our administrator, and then we'll click on our desktop. And then we can see that the file that we actually backed up was a new text document. So we'll click this file over here and we can see these are all referenced with a grey tick to indicate that something down the hierarchy here has been selected for backup or restore. Okay, so now we'll come over here and we'll choose next. And our default wizard here tells us that we're going to restore from our backup.text.bkf. It's a file type backup. We're going to restore to the original locations, but if there's any existing files, don't replace them. So this time what we'll do is we'll go and click on the Advanced button, and then we get a drop down box which says where do we want to restore our files to. The default is the original location, or if that file does exist and we want to retain a copy of it, at this point we would probably choose the alternative location, and then we could browse for another location that we wanted to restore our file to. So we'll leave the original location and we'll choose next. Now we get an option to say, what do we want to do if the file already exists? Do we want to leave the existing file? Do we want to replace it if it's older than our backup file? Or just go ahead and replace it? Well, it doesn't really matter for us as we deleted our file, as you can see over here, so we'll leave existing files and then we'll choose next. Okay, next we have the option of restoring our existing security settings, and there are NTFS file permissions that we talked about earlier. We can also restore our junction points, which are just folders that point to other folders. We can also preserve our existing volume mount points, where we might have a folder reference another disk. And here we can have the option of restoring our cluster registry to the quorum disk, and that's only valid if we're actually using Windows clusters. And then of course we have an option here of restoring our replicated data sets and then marking that restored data as the primary data for any replicas that we might have. So we'll leave those defaults, we'll choose next, and then we've completed the wizard. We can see that our restore is going to come from backup.text.bkf. It's a file restore. we are going to restore the original locations, and we're not going to replace any existing files that might exist on our system. So when we close this wizard by clicking finish, our restore will start, and we can see it starts mounting the media. I'll just pause this video and then we'll return once the restore is completed. Okay, our restore is complete, so we can get a report by clicking on the report button if we like, and we can see what happened in our restore operation. We'll just close that down, and we'll close this down as well. And here we can see that our new text document has been restored. In this video, we took a detailed look at using the NT Backup utility to perform backups on our Windows 2003 server. We also took a look at the archive bit and looked at how that will affect our different backup types. We discussed the differences between the normal copy, incremental, differential, and daily backups. And then finally, we took a look at how to perform a file restore. The most important thing to realize with backups is that they need to be performed. As we said at the start of this video, disasters do happen and we can't prevent them from occurring, but we can plan for the fact that when they do occur, we can minimize the impact of them on our environment with a good, sound backup plan.